According to the Oxford American Dictionary, the definition of a serial killer is a person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive, and typically following a characteristic or predictable behavior pattern. When I was in high school, I developed a curiosity for true crime and serial killers and their mentality and why they become the way they are in particular. I am Anastasia, and I have taken different psychology courses. I have read different books, articles, and listened to hundreds of podcasts based on the life of a serial killer and all the surrounding elements involving from where they grew up, how they grew up, and how they ended up where they are now. I'm going to reference an article by Anusha Subramanian, and it's from the Berkeley Scientific Journal. So I will explain to you the nurture versus nature theory, and I will explain each side individually, and I will give you an example of a serial killer from each side of the theory. The theory was pioneered by Sir Francis Galton, and he did a study about the elements surrounding what makes a serial killer become the way they are. So first off, the nurture side tells you that a serial killer is formed based on their upbringing and their childhood. So the circumstances that they grow up around can change them to either be a good person or to not. So for example, a lot of serial killers were predisposed to neglect, abuse, physically and mentally, and that led them to develop certain mentalities and characteristics that later led them to become serial killers. On the other end, the nature side says that regardless of your circumstances and how you grow up in your environment, you can grow up with a wonderful, loving, caring family, but you are wired to become somebody like a serial killer because of your DNA. There are multiple studies that are coined serial killer genes. You were born with serial killer genes, just like you can inherit different physical characteristics, you can inherit personality characteristics, and these studies show that these certain genes can lead to a predisposition in anger and violence, and a lot of serial killers have these genes. So now I'm going to give you an example of each side and an example of a serial killer that represents each side. So for example, on the nature side, which is somebody who is going to be a serial killer regardless of their circumstances, I have picked Dennis Rader. He is a notorious serial killer, and he grew up relatively normal. He was a Boy Scout. He saved a fellow Boy Scout when he was younger. His parents took him to church. There's no reports of abuse or neglect in his childhood, yet he still became a serial killer. Even though he had all of those elements to become a good person, it is said that he had it in his DNA to let that evil come out and become a serial killer. On the other end, there is Ed Kemper. He did not have a great childhood by any means. Both of his parents were horrible. His father left his family and did not want him. His mother sent him to live with his grandparents. He later murdered his mother and his grandparents, and he is a result of the nurture side of the theory. So it says that because of everything he was exposed to in his environment led him to become that. In my opinion, it can affect you both ways when it comes to serial killers. They can be, they can stem from their environment and from their genes. So I suggest you love your children, give them a lot of Jesus, and they are less likely to become serial killers.